Physics Explained Simply, Episode 29, Embracing Uncertainty and the Pleasure of Not Knowing You've Been Lied to Your Whole Life. Not maliciously, not by bad people, but by a culture, a school system, and a social environment that taught you something deeply, fundamentally wrong about intelligence. It taught you that smart people have answers, that confidence is a sign of knowledge, that saying I don't know is an admission of failure, that uncertainty is weakness, that if you can't give a definitive, clear, unwavering opinion on something, whether it's politics, science, history, or what's happening in the news, then you haven't done the work, you haven't thought hard enough, and maybe, just maybe, you aren't quite as sharp as the person next to you who seems to have everything figured out. But here's what Richard Feynman, one of the greatest minds the 20th century ever produced, believed with every fiber of his scientific soul, that is exactly backwards. The people who always have confident answers are often the most intellectually dangerous people in the room. And the ability to sit comfortably inside a question you cannot yet answer, to let it live in your mind without panic, without forcing a resolution, without grabbing the nearest convenient explanation just to escape the discomfort, that is not weakness. That is the beginning of wisdom. That is what genuine thinking actually looks like. And today, we're going to explore why Feynman believed this so deeply, how it shaped his entire approach to physics, and why his philosophy offers something genuinely liberating for all of us living in a world that screams for certainty at every turn. Let's start with a question. When was the last time you said, out loud, to another human being, I genuinely don't know? Not as a deflection, not as false modesty, but as a real, honest acknowledgement that you were standing at the edge of your understanding and couldn't see what was beyond it. For most people, that moment is uncomfortable. There's a subtle social tax on not knowing. People look at you differently. They wonder if you've been paying attention. In professional settings, not knowing can feel like career risk. In political conversations, it can feel like betrayal. In family discussions, it can feel like you're letting the side down. We live inside a culture of performed certainty, and it is making us less intelligent, less curious, and less capable of finding actual truth. Feynman saw this clearly, and he spent his career modeling something radically different. Here's a moment that captures it perfectly. Late in his life, Feynman gave a commencement address at Caltech, and he said something that surprised the audience. He said that the first thing you have to know is how to know you don't know something. That sounds almost obvious when you hear it, but sit with it for a moment, because what he was pointing at is a real, specific, learnable skill, the ability to honestly audit your own knowledge. To stand in front of an idea and ask, do I actually know this, or do I just believe it? Do I have evidence, or do I have familiarity? Have I examined this, or have I simply absorbed it? Most people never develop this skill, because developing it requires comfort with uncertainty, and our culture actively discourages that comfort. But here's where it gets interesting. Feynman didn't just tolerate uncertainty, he loved it. Not in a performative way, not as some philosophical pose. He genuinely, viscerally found pleasure in mystery. He once said that he thought it was much more interesting to live not knowing than to have answers which might be wrong. And that answers which might be wrong, false certainty, were worse than honest ignorance because they close the door on real exploration. Think about what that means. Most of us treat not knowing as a temporary, slightly embarrassing condition. A waiting room we want to get out of as fast as possible. We rush toward explanations, even bad ones, because the discomfort of the waiting room is more unbearable than the relief of a wrong answer. Feynman treated not knowing as a destination worth visiting, a place worth spending time, a state of mind that had its own unique beauty. And he was on to something deep, because that shift in perspective changes everything about how you interact with hard problems. Let's think about this with a thought experiment. Imagine you're hiking in a forest and you hear a strange sound. You've never heard it before. It's unusual, slightly eerie. There are two versions of you in this story. Version 1 rushes immediately to an explanation. Oh, that's probably just the wind, or a bird, nothing to worry about. The sound is filed away, explained, dismissed. Version 1 keeps walking. Version 2 pauses, listens again, lets the strangeness of it sit there, wonders about it, tries to imagine what creature, what atmospheric condition, what combination of variables could produce that sound. Version 2 stays curious. Version 2 might over time discover something genuinely new, The first version is more comfortable. The second version is more alive. Feynman lived his version 2. In every domain, in every conversation about every problem, he was the guy who didn't just keep walking past the strange sound. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's fine for Feynman. He was a genius. He had the cognitive resources to hold a lot of open questions simultaneously without it overwhelming him. But for the rest of us, doesn't uncertainty produce anxiety? Doesn't it feel better, even if it's slightly less accurate, to have a working explanation rather than a yawning void? Yes, it does feel better, in the short term. But Feynman's argument, and the argument of science at its best, is that this short-term comfort creates long-term blindness. When you grab a wrong answer to escape the discomfort of not knowing, you don't just have a wrong answer. You now have a wrong answer that you are emotionally invested in. A wrong answer you will defend. A wrong answer you will use as the foundation for further wrong conclusions. You built a house on a lie you told yourself to feel better at 3 in the afternoon, and here's the brutal part. You'll protect that house, because it's yours now. This is what Feynman was critiquing when he talked about people who cling to certainty. He wasn't just making a philosophical observation. He was identifying a specific, destructive psychological pattern that operates in science, in politics, in everyday life. When a person needs certainty, not just prefers it but needs it, emotionally requires it, they become incapable of genuine inquiry. Because genuine inquiry requires the willingness to be wrong. The willingness to arrive somewhere you didn't expect. The willingness to let the evidence take you somewhere uncomfortable. A person addicted to certainty cannot do that. They will unconsciously, or sometimes very consciously, bend their inquiry toward their pre-existing conclusion. They will notice the evidence that confirms what they already believe. They will discount or ignore the evidence that challenges it. They will interpret ambiguous information in the most convenient direction. And then they will defend that conclusion with the unshakable confidence of someone who has never once genuinely questioned it. Stop. Think about that for a moment. How many people do you know who fit that description? In your family, in your social circles, in public life? How many brilliant, educated, articulate people have you watched defend a wrong position with extraordinary cleverness, deploying their intelligence entirely in service of protecting a belief they formed before they really understood the problem? Feynman saw this everywhere, and it drove him a little bit crazy, because from where he sat, the performance of certainty and the possession of genuine knowledge were almost inverse to each other. The people who actually understood the deepest layers of physics were almost always the most tentative, the most hedged, the most careful about the edges of their claims. And the people who had the least genuine understanding were often the most loudly, aggressively certain. This is not a coincidence, it's a pattern, and it runs through every domain of human thought. Here's another thought experiment, and this one is directly Feynman's. He used to ask his students to imagine a Martian scientist visiting Earth for the first time. This Martian has never seen our planet, never absorbed our cultural assumptions, never been taught which questions are considered settled and which are still open. The Martian arrives and simply looks at what's happening. What would that Martian find confusing? What would strike the Martian as mysterious that we treat as obvious? Feynman loved this exercise because it exposed how much of what we call knowing is actually just familiarity. We've seen something so many times that we stop questioning it. We confuse recognition with understanding. The Martian, unburdened by familiarity, would look at ordinary water and find it strange, would look at magnetism and be completely baffled, would look at the way light bends through glass and have 1,000 questions that most humans stopped asking before the age of 10. This is what Feynman was trying to recover, that Martian's beginner's mind, that willingness to look at something familiar and genuinely ask, but wait, why does it actually do that? And you cannot do that if you need certainty, because the need for certainty closes the question before the inquiry has even begun. Let's go deeper. One of the most sophisticated things Feynman practiced, and it's genuinely rare, was the ability to hold multiple contradictory explanations simultaneously. Not to pick one, not to force a resolution, but to keep several possible interpretations of a phenomenon alive in his mind at the same time, weighting each one, testing each one mentally, allowing them to compete with each other until the evidence pointed clearly in one direction. Most people can't do this. It creates too much cognitive discomfort. We're pattern-seeking creatures who like consistency. Having two contradictory things in your head at once produces something like a low-level hum of anxiety that most people resolve by just choosing one and discarding the other. But Feynman recognized that premature resolution is one of the most dangerous moves in scientific thinking. If you collapse your uncertainty too soon, you might throw away the right answer along with the wrong one. You might kill the hypothesis that would eventually prove incorrect just because it was inconvenient to hold it simultaneously with its competitor. Quantum mechanics actually demands this from us, and it's part of why quantum mechanics is so psychologically hard for people. The universe at the quantum scale doesn't behave like anything in our everyday experience. Particles exist in multiple states simultaneously. Definitive outcomes only emerge at the moment of measurement. The mathematics works beautifully, but it's asking your intuition to hold contradictory things at once, and most human intuitions refuse to cooperate. Feynman's ability to sit with that discomfort was part of what made him such an exceptional quantum physicist. He didn't demand that the universe conform to his psychological comfort. He let the universe be weird. He followed the weirdness wherever it led. He once famously said that if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand quantum mechanics. He was not being falsely modest. He was making a precise epistemological claim that genuine engagement with quantum theory requires maintaining a kind of permanent, open-eyed uncertainty about the deepest layer of what's actually happening, and he was comfortable there. That was his natural habitat. Here's a third thought experiment, and this one touches something personal. Think about the last time you changed your mind, really changed your mind, about something significant based on evidence or argument. Now think about how that felt. Was it smooth? Was it easy? Did you update your beliefs like a well-designed computer program processing new data? Probably not. Probably it was uncomfortable, maybe even a little humiliating. Maybe there was a moment of internal resistance before the new information finally took root. That resistance is real. It's human. And it's not a bug. It's a feature that served our ancestors well in a simpler world where consistency and predictability were survival advantages. But in a complex world where genuine truth requires navigating ambiguity, following evidence through uncomfortable territory, and regularly updating your model of reality, that resistance is a liability. Feynman didn't try to eliminate the resistance, but he trained himself to recognize it and not obey it. He developed what you might call an allergic reaction to his own false certainty. He was suspicious of himself whenever he felt too sure about something. He used that feeling of complete confidence as a signal to look harder, to ask more questions, to see if there was something he'd missed. This is counterintuitive. We're taught to trust our convictions, to stand by our beliefs, to not be swayed by every contrary wind. But Feynman understood that conviction and correctness are not the same thing, that you can feel absolutely certain about something that is absolutely wrong, that the feeling of certainty is a psychological event, not an epistemological guarantee. And so he made uncertainty his default setting. Not despair about uncertainty, not anxiety about it, not frustration, just a calm, productive, curious openness to the possibility that there was always more to understand. Now let's talk about what this looks like in practice, in science, and in life. In science, the embrace of uncertainty is built into the structure of the method itself. You form a hypothesis. You design an experiment to test it. You collect data. And then, this is the part people forget, you try to prove yourself wrong. Not right, wrong. Because if you're genuinely interested in truth, the most valuable thing you can do with a hypothesis is attack it, push on it. Look for the conditions under which it breaks. Try to find the evidence that would refute it. And if, after all that pressure, the hypothesis survives, then you've learned something real. You've earned the right to hold that belief with a little more confidence. But if your goal is to feel certain rather than to find truth, you will never do that. You will only look for confirming evidence. You will treat your hypothesis like a child that you need to protect rather than an idea you need to test. Feynman saw bad science that way constantly. People running experiments not to find out what was true, but to generate data that supported what they already believed. People interpreting ambiguous results in the most convenient direction. People treating the scientific method as a PR exercise for their existing conclusions. He had very little patience for this, and he extended the same critique beyond science. He applied it to everyday reasoning, to political thinking, to the way people consume news and form opinions about the world. Anywhere that human beings were performing certainty rather than pursuing truth, Feynman saw a version of the same failure, the failure to tolerate the discomfort of not knowing. But here's where it gets genuinely interesting and genuinely beautiful. Because Feynman's philosophy wasn't just about avoiding error. It wasn't purely a defensive strategy, a way of not being wrong. There was something more positive than that, more joyful. He actually found the mystery pleasurable, not as a consolation prize, not as a way of making peace with ignorance, but as a genuine source of delight. He thought that living inside open questions was one of the richest experiences available to a conscious mind, that the not knowing was where the real action was. That definitive answers, while satisfying, closed a kind of wonderful aliveness in your relationship with a problem. Think about finishing a great novel. There's satisfaction, sure, but there's also a small loss. The open possibility of the unread pages is gone. You know now, the mystery has resolved, and something, not everything, but something has ended. Feynman felt that way about unsolved problems in nature. He didn't want all the answers. Not really, because the absence of the questions would have stripped something irreplaceable from his experience of thinking. This is a radical reframe. Most of us treat questions as problems to be eliminated. Feynman treated them as gifts to be inhabited, and this reframe has real consequences. Because if questions are gifts, if uncertainty is pleasurable rather than painful, then you approach intellectual life completely differently. You're not sprinting toward resolution. You're exploring. You're wandering. You're following the thread because the following itself is worthwhile, regardless of where you end up. This is what Feynman meant when he talked about the pleasure of finding things out, not the pleasure of having found things out, not the final payoff of the correct answer, but the ongoing, living, present tense pleasure of the search itself. And here's the deepest point, the one that ties everything together. Genuine curiosity requires genuine uncertainty. You cannot be curious about something you think you already understand. Curiosity, real curiosity, the kind that drives discovery, requires an honest encounter with the edges of your knowledge, a real felt sense of standing at a boundary and not knowing what's on the other side. If you perform certainty, if you collapse your uncertainty prematurely, if you grab the nearest convenient explanation to escape the discomfort of not knowing, you don't just get the wrong answer. You lose the curiosity. You lose the exploring. You lose the aliveness that comes from genuinely not knowing and genuinely wanting to find out. You become intellectually a person who is just walking past strange sounds in the forest. And this is why Feynman's philosophy matters so much right now, not just as an abstract intellectual position, but as a practical, urgent, culturally necessary counterweight to the world we actually live in. We live in a world that rewards performed certainty. Social media platforms amplify the confident voice over the tentative one. Algorithms favor strong opinion over careful nuance. Political culture treats "I'm not sure" as weakness and aggressive conviction as strength. We consume information through channels specifically designed to confirm what we already believe, insulated from the discomfort of genuinely contrary evidence. And the result is a civilization that is louder, more confident, and in many ways less genuinely knowledgeable than it could be. More defended, more brittle, more incapable of the kind of honest inquiry that actually moves understanding forward. Feynman would have found all of this deeply troubling, not because he was naive about human nature, but because he understood that the alternative was available, that people were capable of comfort with uncertainty, that intellectual humility was learnable, that the pleasure of not knowing was real and accessible to anyone willing to step off the treadmill of performed confidence. The alternative is available to you right now. You can practice saying, "I don't know," without apologizing for it. You can sit with a question longer than is comfortable before reaching for an answer. You can hold two contradictory explanations simultaneously and not panic. You can treat your most confident beliefs with a little extra suspicion, the way Feynman did, precisely because you're so sure of them. You can, in other words, choose intellectual honesty over social comfort, real curiosity over performed knowledge, the long game of genuine understanding over the short game of winning the argument. This isn't easy. The social pressures are real. The discomfort is genuine. But the payoff, the way Feynman experienced it, was worth everything. A life lived in honest contact with mystery, a mind genuinely open to surprise, the ongoing pleasure of not knowing and wanting, with real curiosity and real aliveness to find out. Richard Feynman looked at the universe and felt wonder rather than anxiety about everything he didn't understand. He felt grateful for the questions. He saw not knowing not as a temporary embarrassment to be resolved as quickly as possible, but as the permanent, beautiful condition of a conscious mind trying honestly to understand an endlessly complex reality. He once said that nature, which is the same word he might have used for truth, will not be fooled. You can perform certainty all you like. You can construct elaborate, confident-sounding explanations for things you don't actually understand. But nature will keep behaving the way it actually behaves, indifferent to your confidence, indifferent to your need for resolution. The only way to actually learn something real is to stop needing to already know it. Stop. Feel how strange that is, how counterintuitive, how genuinely difficult in a world that rewards the performance of knowing. And then consider what might open up for you, intellectually, emotionally, in the quality of your thinking and the depth of your understanding, if you gave yourself permission, real permission, to simply not know. The greatest physicist who ever picked up a bongo drum and laughed out loud at the weirdness of the universe thought that was the most important permission you could give yourself. Not knowing, he understood, was not the absence of intelligence. It was the beginning of it. And if you look at the deepest, most unresolved questions in physics right now, the nature of dark matter, the reconciliation of quantum mechanics and general relativity, the origin of the universe, the question of why there is something rather than nothing, you find something remarkable. The scientists sitting closest to those questions, the ones who have spent the most time genuinely engaging with them, are also almost universally the most careful, the most hedged, the most honest about what they don't know. The closer you get to the edge of genuine understanding, the more clearly you see how much darkness lies beyond it. And if you've really understood what Feynman was pointing at, your reaction to that darkness is not despair. It's something that feels a lot like joy. Welcome to the edge. It's the most interesting place there is. If this kind of thinking resonates with you, if you want to spend more time at the edge of what's known, exploring the questions that don't yet have clean answers, sitting with the beautiful strangeness of the universe the way Feynman did, then keep exploring. Stay curious, stay honest, and above all, stay comfortable in the place where you don't yet know. That's where everything real begins.